Here are all the topics that will be covered in the US Constitution revision video. This particular video is going to focus on the nature of the US Constitution, looking specifically at its three main features. This codified document consists of the 7 articles, the first 3 of which explain how the 3 branches of national government would work and what powers they should have. This is the enumerated or delegated powers of the Constitution. Article 1 establishes Congress as the national legislative, defining its membership, the qualifications and method of its election of its members, as well as its powers. Under Article 1, Section 8, Congress was given the powers such as those to coin money and declare war. Article 2 decided somewhat surprisingly on a singular rather than a plural executive by vesting all executive power in the hands of a president. The president would be chosen indirectly by an electoral college. Article 3 established the United States Supreme Court. The Congress quickly added trial and appeal courts. Although not explicitly granted, the court was to have the role of umpire of the Constitution, implied in the Supremacy Clause of Article 4 and the provision of Article 3 itself, that the court's judicial power applies to all cases arising under this Constitution. The court would make this more explicit in its landmark decision of Marbury v. Madison in 1803. These 3 articles contain the enumerated powers granted to the federal government. The significance of this is that the federal government does not possess unlimited power, but only such powers as given in the Constitution. It also gives them specific powers. There are several advantages and disadvantages to having a codified constitution. Let's start by going through the advantages. The advantages are that all the constitutional provisions can be found easily in one document. The provisions within the Constitution are entrenched and are therefore protected from arbitrary change. It provides more significant and effective checks and balances between the various branches of government. It can be made surprisingly flexible by judicial interpretation. On the other side, though, there are many disadvantages. It tends to elevate the importance of unelected judges over elected officials. It can be inflexible and therefore fail to change as society changes. The enumeration of rights and liberties does not necessarily mean that those rights and liberties are safeguarded in reality. It also tends to be less revolutionary. A second feature of the US Constitution is its blend of specificity and vagueness. So far, everything discussed in this video has been focused on specifics, yet not everything in the Constitution is so cut and dried. We need to be aware of what is known as implied, reserved, and concurrent powers. Implied powers are powers possessed by the federal government by interference from those powers delegated to it in the Constitution. These powers aren't explicitly mentioned. For example, the power to draft people into the armed forces may be implied from Congress's enumerated power to raise an army and navy. Many implied powers come from the necessary and proper clause of Article 1, Section 8. Often referred to as the elastic clause because the powers of federal government can be stretched beyond delegated and enumerated powers, making some parts of the Constitution explicit and others very vague. The Constitution also includes what we call reserved powers. This power is that they are reserved for the states alone and can be found in the 10th Amendment. Finally, there is concurrent powers, which are powers shared by the federal and state governments, such as collecting taxes, building roads, and maintaining courts. All of these different powers contribute to specific yet the vague nature of the Constitution, as there are areas where power is explicitly mentioned in the document. Furthermore, there are powers that are not explicitly stated and have become suggested powers over time. The third and final feature I'll be looking at in this video is the entrenchment of the US Constitution. This is the application of the extra legal safeguards to a constitutional provision to make it more difficult to amend or abolish it. This is to ensure protection from those who would wish to change or abolish the Constitution. The US Constitution is entrenched in several ways. Firstly, the way this is done is to insist upon some kind of complicated system as well as supermajorities in order to make the amendment process exceedingly difficult, and thereby affording the special protection. This, added to the fact that the US Constitution is a codified document, makes the process all the more difficult. These three features are important in considering the significance not only of the US Constitution, but its impact on US politics and government. The final feature of entrenchment will be the focus of the next part of the video. Earlier in the video, we were looking at the three features of the US Constitution and the significance these features have on the implication of the Constitution. Alongside these features, the Constitution also has three key principles that form the core of the Constitution, which will be the focus of this next part of the video. These three principles are separation of powers, checks and balances, and federalism. These core principles are designed to create limited government intended by the Founding Fathers. As stated in the Constitution itself, the principle of limited government states that the government is restricted in what it may do and each individual has the rights that the government cannot take away. The Founding Fathers wanted limited government, whereby government would only do what was essential, leaving the citizens' fundamental rights and freedoms as untouched as possible in an organised and orderly society. The Founders wanted to move away from the tyranny of an absolute monarch and ensure that no government would ignore the rights of individuals. The Bill of Rights is an example of how the Constitution limits the power of the government by protecting certain inalienable rights of citizens.